Aisha was gathering kindling when the first wave hit. A vice clamped around her lower back, stealing the air from her lungs. She dropped the branches. Their brittle whisper vanished into the immense savannah. She recognized the sensation, the ancient dread and sanctity the village elders had spoken of. Another spasm, keener this time, sent her staggering toward the colossal baobab. Its swollen girth offered a tangible solace against the boundless horizon. The air shimmered with heat, thick with the aroma of parched earth and the ghost of distant rain. Reaching the tree, she braced herself against its corrugated hide, the sun a brutal weight on her shoulders. The pain mounted, relentless surges threatening to drown her. Aisha squeezed her eyes shut, drawing on the rhythm of her breath, recalling her mother's lullabies. She needed reserves she wasn't sure she possessed. Hours dissolved into a blur of agony and depletion. The sun bled crimson and gold across the sky. Then, a primal cry ripped from her throat, echoing across the plains as her daughter arrived. A tiny, perfect being. Aisha cradled her close, murmuring age-old blessings. But the reprieve was fleeting. Scarcely had she caught her breath when another contraction seized her. Winds. Unanticipated, unprepared for. A surge of panic threatened to engulf her, but the miniature life in her arms anchored her. She had to steel herself. The second birth proved a grueling ordeal, stretching into what felt like eternity. Twilight had almost swallowed the sun, painting the savannah in shades of gray and indigo, when the second baby, a boy, finally graced the world. Utterly drained yet exultant, Aisha held them both against her, their fragile warmth a balm against her skin. 2 miniature heartbeats, 2 lives utterly reliant on her. She gazed up at the baobab, its branches reaching skyward like arms raised in supplication. Ifiak, she breathed to the girl, wisdom. Turning to the boy, a Kong, strength. May they both be endowed with what they needed to thrive. The night descended, bringing with it a sharp chill. She huddled at the baobab's base, using her shawl to shield the twins from the cold. Fear, a serpent, coiled within her. He had vowed to return, sworn his devotion. Yet the sun had vanished, and he remained absent. The savannah stretched around her, indifferent to her ordeal, a vast and merciless expanse. She was utterly alone. A merchant's cruel decision. The mud hut seemed to have shrunk, the air heavy with Aisha's scent mingled with milk, and under it all, a prickle of raw fear. Sunlight lanced through the woven walls, igniting dust motes that swirled above her sleeping infants. Aisha stilled, barely breathing. Footfalls scraped on the parched earth outside. Jabari. He stooped through the entrance, his usual confident gait faltering. For a fleeting second, she glimpsed the young man she'd loved, the one who'd whispered sweet nothings under a starlit expanse. The keen glint in his eyes, typically reflecting the shrewdness of a merchant assessing value, softened as he regarded the babies. "They're flawless," he murmured, kneeling. He extended a roughened hand, gently tracing the delicate curve of a cheek. "Aisha, they've got my eyes." He lifted his gaze to hers, a genuine smile briefly illuminating his face. "Twins. I never dreamed." A fragile bud of hope unfurled within Aisha, a tender shoot in the desolate landscape of her heart. "They need names," she rasped, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and suppressed grief. A chuckle escaped him, a sound that had once sent tremors of delight through her. "Then we'll name them, like any devoted father would." His gaze swept the confined space, his expression undergoing a subtle shift. This isn't fit for them. We must get you to my father's compound, to proper care." Then came the alteration, abrupt and unsettling. A low murmur drifted from beyond the doorway. Jabari's smile evaporated. He rose sharply, his spine stiffening. Framed by the stark sunlight, 2 figures materialized. His cousins, Bemba and Tumalo. Aisha knew their sneering visages, their cutting remarks about her inferior standing. Bemba's voice oozed insincere concern. "Jabari, are you all right? We grew anxious when you vanished. Tumalo echoed the sentiment with a nod, his eyes raking the hut with undisguised contempt. This hovel. It's not fit for livestock, much less the future head of the trading empire. Jabari's gaze flickered between Aisha and his cousins, his throat working. He raked a hand through his hair, stirring up dust. I was simply checking on her, ensuring her well-being. Checking? Bemba scoffed. Or laying claim. Jabari, be reasonable. Twins by a nobody. What will your father say? The Council of Elders. This could unravel everything. The air crackled with implicit accusations, laden with the weight of ingrained tradition. Aisha's fragile hope shattered. She understood what was coming. Jabari avoided her gaze, addressing his cousins instead. You're right. Course you're right. A moment of indiscretion. I was overcome. He withdrew a small, well-worn leather pouch from his belt, tossing it onto the mat near Aisha. A meager jingle of coins. This should suffice, he stated, his voice hollow, devoid of any emotion. For their upkeep. Cannot acknowledge them. It would decimate my family. He retreated a step, then another. I'm sorry, Aisha. The words tasted like bitter residue in the silence. He pivoted and strode away, his cousins escorting him like carrion birds. The sunlight, now devoid of warmth, felt like a scorching brand against Aisha's skin. The twins stirred, their faint cries echoing the vast emptiness that had just consumed her world. Jabari never glanced back. Savannah's embrace and threat. The sun, a relentless forge, hammered at Aisha's skull. Her throat rasped, each swallow a fiery torment. Water was a forgotten luxury, a ghost of the life she'd known before him. His name remained unspoken, a betrayal that festered, its sting eclipsing even the gnawing hunger. The twins fretted, their tiny faces blindly seeking sustenance from her arid skin. Aisha shifted them within the scant shadow cast by the ancient baobab, their cries a fragile song against the drone of flies, already anticipating life's end. She had to find something. Rising with immense effort, she surveyed the horizon. The endless sweep of parched grassland offered only shimmering mirages. A memory flickered, a stand of berry bushes, perhaps half a day distant. Perilous trek. Gamble. Yet the alternative was unbearable. She settled the twins deeper in the hollowed roots, shielding them from the sun's cruel blaze with a fragment of her worn cloth. Mama will return, she croaked, her voice a threadbare promise. Hush, just be still. The earth beneath her feet was cruel, a tapestry of sharp stones and thorny scrub. Each step brought a fresh wave of pain. Her legs felt like anchors, her vision swam. She clawed at the earth, searching for sustenance, turning over rocks in vain hope of finding insects. The land mirrored the desolation within her. As dusk bled across the sky in bruised hues of violet and crimson, chilling laughter drifted on the wind. Hyenas. Aisha's pulse thundered. She had to reach the twins. She stumbled back toward the baobab, each breath a ragged sob. The laughter intensified, drawing nearer. She saw them now. 3 shadows circling the tree, eyes glowing with predatory hunger in the gathering gloom. Leave them, she screamed, her voice raw and feeble. She seized a rock, clutching it in her trembling hand. Keep away from my babies. They didn't yield. They crept closer, their guttural cackles sending tremors through her. They sensed her fragility, her desperation. They scented the promise of milk, the helplessness of the newborns. Aisha positioned herself before the tree, a pitiful bulwark against their advance. She would fight. She would fight until breath deserted her. The twins whimpered anew, a sound that both stoked her terror and solidified her resolve. Abruptly, a deep rumble vibrated through the air, a sound distinct from the hyena's manic glee. They froze, ears twitching. From the shadows, a silhouette emerged, lithe and commanding. Leopard. Its movement spoke of lethal grace. The hyenas, momentarily checked, faltered. Then, with a chorus of snarling frustration, They dissolved back into the darkness, their laughter extinguished by an unsettling quiet. Collapse and vulnerability. The twins mewled, a thin, reedy sound that clawed at Aisha's dwindling strength. She fumbled with the waterskin, the leather rough against her cracked fingers. It was almost empty. Just enough, maybe, to dampen her tongue and give them each a few precious drops. Yesterday's meager handful of berries had done little to replenish her. Her milk felt thin, unsatisfying. Each breath rasped in her throat, a painful reminder of the relentless sun and the dust that coated everything. The savannah shimmered in the heat, a deceptive mirage of promise that only amplified her despair. She had to find water. She shifted, trying to rearrange the makeshift shade she'd fashioned from broad leaves, but her arms trembled. Her vision swam, the twins' tiny faces blurring into a single, indistinct mass. She blinked, trying to focus, to imprint their images onto her failing memory. A fly buzzed lazily near her face, and she hadn't the energy to swat it away. "Mama's here," she croaked, her voice a dry whisper. "Mama won't let anything happen to you." But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her. She felt a sharp, stabbing pain in her abdomen, a final, cruel reminder of the ordeal she'd endured. Her legs felt like lead, refusing to obey her will. She needed to move to find help, but the weight of her own body felt unbearable. She reached for the nearest twin, intending to lift him closer, to feel the fragile warmth of his skin against hers. But her hand faltered, her fingers twitching uselessly in the air. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, and the world tilted violently. The ground rushed up to meet her. Darkness bloomed at the edges of her vision, swallowing the light. She heard the twins cry, their small voices rising in pitch and volume, a desperate plea that echoed in the vast emptiness. She wanted to answer to reassure them, but her tongue felt thick and unresponsive. She was failing them. She tried to cling to consciousness, to fight the encroaching darkness, but her strength had deserted her. Her body was a broken vessel, drained of all life. The twins' cries intensified, a frantic chorus of hunger and fear. The sound pierced the fog in her mind, a final, agonizing reminder of her failure. The image of their vulnerable, unprotected faces burned into her consciousness as she slipped into the abyss. Duma's maternal instinct. The setting sun painted the savannah in hues of burnt orange and bruised purple. Duma, sleek and silent, stalked through the tall, whispering grasses. Her belly rumbled, a persistent reminder of her hungry cubs nestled in the rocky outcrop a mile east. Tonight, a plump scrub hare would have to do. She lowered her body, muscles coiled like springs, eyes fixed on the unsuspecting creature nibbling at the base of the colossal baobab tree. A sudden shrill sound pierced the evening calm, startling the hare into a frantic dash for cover. Duma froze, ears twitching, every muscle tense. It wasn't the cry of a jackal, nor the hoot of an owl. It was smaller, weaker, and undeniably filled with distress. Another cry, higher and more insistent this time, seemed to emanate from the shade beneath the baobab's sprawling branches. Duma's hunt forgotten, she crept forward, her usual predatory grace now laced with caution. The scent that drifted on the breeze was unfamiliar, unsettling. It wasn't animal. It was human. She paused at the edge of the shade, her amber eyes narrowed. Two small bundles lay on a tattered cloth, their tiny faces red and contorted in silent screams. Twins. Duma had seen humans before, mostly from a distance, rattling by in noisy metal contraptions. She knew they were dangerous, unpredictable. But these were different. Helpless. The sound clawed at something deep within her, a primal ache she hadn't felt so acutely since her own cubs were born. It was a pull, a tug, an undeniable maternal instinct overriding her ingrained fear. She took a tentative step closer, then another, her tail twitching nervously. The cries intensified, reaching a fever pitch that resonated within her very bones. Duma circled the twins cautiously, her nose twitching, trying to decipher the strange scent. They smelled vulnerable, abandoned. Her ears flattened against her head as she let out a low, guttural growl, a warning to any other creature that might dare approach. The growl morphed into a soft rumble, a soothing sound she usually reserved for her own cubs. It was an attempt to comfort, to reassure, a language understood across species. One of the twins, a girl, stilled her crying momentarily, her tiny hand reaching out blindly. Duma hesitated, her instincts warring with her ingrained caution. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lowered her head and nudged the baby's hand with her nose. The skin was soft, fragile, unlike anything she had ever felt. The baby whimpered, then latched onto Duma's coarse fur, her tiny fingers gripping tightly. Duma remained still, allowing the baby to clutch her fur. The other twin continued to cry, its face flushed and streaming with tears. Duma knew, with a certainty that resonated in her very soul, that she couldn't leave them here. An unlikely rescue. The sun beat down, baking the already parched earth. Duma licked her dry nose, the metallic tang of old blood still lingering. The hunt had been fruitless, the gazelles skittish. Now the strange scent, not prey, not predator, but something else entirely, tugged at her again. She padded back to the thicket, her lean muscles rippling beneath her spotted coat. The scent was stronger here, acrid and unsettling, mingling with the sweetness of milk. And then she saw them. Two tiny creatures, smaller than her smallest cub, lay whimpering on the bare ground. Their skin was pink and wrinkled, their cries thin and desperate. Duma circled them cautiously, her amber eyes narrowed. They were helpless, vulnerable, utterly out of place. A wave of something unexpected, something unfamiliar, washed over her. It wasn't hunger. Lowering her head, she nudged one of the creatures with her nose. It flailed a tiny arm, its wail intensifying. A low rumble vibrated in Duma's chest, a sound she hadn't made since her own cubs were newborns. The decision was swift, instinctive. She couldn't leave them. Carefully, Duma opened her jaws, wider than felt comfortable. She had carried fawns this way, sometimes, moving them from danger. This felt different. Gently, so gently, she closed her teeth around the scruff of the smaller twin's neck, lifting it with infinite care. The creature stilled, its whimpers fading to small, hiccuping breaths. She turned and began to lope towards her den, a shallow cave nestled amongst the koppies, the twin dangling limply but unharmed. The sun felt hotter now, the weight in her mouth significant, but Duma pressed on. She had to get it to safety. Reaching the den, she deposited the twin on the soft earth floor, amongst the wriggling mass of her own 3 cubs. They were bigger, stronger, their coats already showing the beginnings of spots, but they instinctively nuzzled the newcomer. Duma returned to the thicket. The other twin lay exactly where she'd left it, its cries now weaker, more desperate. The same wave of protectiveness surged through her. Again the careful grip, the burdened run back to the den. This time, when she placed the twin down, it instinctively latched onto one of her teats, suckling with surprising ferocity. Duma felt a sharp pang, a flicker of pain, but she didn't flinch. Her own cubs jostled for position, and soon all 5 were nursing, a tangle of spotted fur and pink skin, drawing life from her weary body. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the savannah. Duma closed her eyes, the scent of milk and babies filling her senses. The hunt could wait. Tonight she was a mother's hope. Aisha gasped, a strangled sound lost in the vast stillness. Her throat felt like sandpaper, her limbs heavy as stone. Disorientation clawed at her. Where? The acacia tree. The vultures circling, faint specks against the merciless blue. The memory, a jagged shard, pierced her. The leopard, the twins, Duma. Hope, fragile as a newborn's breath, flickered within her. She pushed herself upright, every muscle screaming in protest. The sun beat down, a physical assault. She had to find them. Her gaze swept the ochre earth. Tracks, Duma's tracks. Clear paw prints leading away from the killing site, heading east towards the koppies. Aisha stumbled forward, driven by a primal instinct that eclipsed her pain. Each step was agony, each breath a labor. The prints were faint now, partially obscured by the wind-blown sand, but she clung to them, her lifeline in this desolate landscape. The sun climbed higher, scorching her skin. She licked her cracked lips, tasting dust and desperation. How long had she been unconscious? Twins. Were they even alive? The thought was a brutal hammer blow, threatening to shatter her resolve. She crested a small rise and saw them. Copies. A cluster of granite boulders, ancient and weathered, rising from the plain like the bones of the earth. And closer, near the base of the largest copy, a dark opening, a den. Aisha's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to move faster, her vision blurring, the world tilting. She reached the den, her legs trembling so violently she could barely stand. A low growl, a rumble of warning, emanated from the darkness. "Duma," Aisha croaked. "Duma, please." She crawled forward, peering into the gloom. The smell was overwhelming. Earth, fur, milk, and something else, something undeniably human. Her eyes adjusted. Shapes emerged from the shadows. Duma, lying on her side, her golden fur gleaming in the dappled light. Her cubs, 2 of them, squirmed and suckled. And nestled between them, tiny and vulnerable, were her twins. One of the babies, Leo, turned his head, his small mouth latching instinctively onto Duma's teat. His brother, Luca, was already nursing contentedly, his tiny hand kneading Duma's fur. The lioness looked up at Aisha, her amber eyes filled with a fierce protectiveness, but also something else, acceptance, understanding. Tears streamed down Aisha's face, hot and unstoppable. Relief washed over her, so profound it almost knocked her unconscious again. They were alive, cared for. An impossible miracle unfolding before her eyes. A mother's hope, answered in the most unexpected way. Harmony in the wild. The twins whimpered, a chorus of tiny distressed sounds that tore at Aisha's heart. Her leg throbbed, each movement sending sharp needles of pain up her thigh, but she ignored it. She had to. They needed her. She gathered them closer, burying her face in their soft, downy hair. "Shoo," she murmured, her voice rough. "Mama's here. Mama's got you." She began to hum, a tuneless melody at first. Then slowly, the rhythm of a lullaby took shape. It was an old song, one her own mother used to sing, a song about the moon and the stars and the promise of a new dawn. The cubs, both hers and Duma's, seemed to find solace in the sound. Their cries softened, replaced by gentle sighs. Duma watched from the edge of the thicket, her amber eyes narrowed. For days, she had kept her distance, a silent, imposing presence. Now something seemed to have shifted. The lullaby, perhaps. Or maybe it was the quiet determination in Aisha's eyes, the undeniable love she poured onto the cubs. Aisha finished the song, her throat raw. She rummaged through her meager supplies, finding the last of the dried berries. Scant nourishment, but it was all she had. She held out a handful towards Duma. "For you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "And for the cubs." Duma hesitated, her gaze flicking between Aisha and the berries. Hunger gnawed at her, a constant, insistent demand. Slowly, cautiously, she approached. She lowered her head, sniffing the offering. Then, with a soft rumble in her chest, she took the berries, chewing them deliberately, her eyes never leaving Aisha's. As Duma ate, Aisha reached out, her hand trembling. She gently touched Duma's flank, her fingers brushing against the thick, tawny fur. Duma flinched, then stilled. Aisha continued, her touch light and soothing, mimicking the grooming behavior she'd observed between the lioness and her own cubs. She carefully picked away a tick nestled near Duma's shoulder. Duma lowered her head again, nudging Aisha's hand with her massive head. It was an invitation, a silent offering of trust. Aisha understood. She leaned forward, pressing her cheek against Duma's warm fur. The scent of sun-baked earth and wild animal filled her senses. She felt a strange sense of peace settle over her, a fragile harmony in the wild, untamed world. Duma began to groom Aisha in return, her rough tongue scraping gently across Aisha's matted hair, a gesture of acceptance, of kinship. The cubs, sensing the shift in the air, nestled closer, a tangle of fur and limbs, united by hunger, by fear, and now by a fragile burgeoning hope. The sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long dancing shadows across the savannah. Atonement and sanctuary. The whispers reached Jabari on the wind, carried from village to village like dandelion seeds. At first, they were dismissed as folklore, fantastical tales spun by firelight. A human woman, abandoned in the savannah, raised by a leopard. Then came the details, impossible yet consistent. A woman with eyes the color of the evening sky, twin cubs with startling blue eyes, and a leopard unlike any other, fiercely protective, a silent guardian. The whispers were a branding iron on his soul. Aisha, his Aisha, and his children. He hadn't slept properly since leaving them. The faces of his elders, stern and unforgiving, haunted his waking hours, but so did the image of Aisha, her face etched with betrayal. He'd told himself he was doing what was best for everyone, preserving his family's honor, securing his legacy. But legacy felt hollow now, honor a bitter taste in his mouth. He turned his back on the life he knew, the life he thought he wanted. The jewels, the land, the power. It all seemed insignificant compared to the ache in his chest. He traveled swiftly, driven by a desperate hope that the whispers were true, and a gnawing fear that he was too late. The baobab tree stood sentinel against the setting sun, its branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the heavens. He approached cautiously, his heart hammering against his ribs. The air was thick with the scent of earth and something else, something wild and untamed. Then he saw them. Aisha sat bathed in the golden light, mending a tear in a piece of animal hide. The twins, now several months old, wrestled playfully at her feet, their laughter echoing through the clearing. And Duma, the leopard, lay regally nearby, her amber eyes watchful, relaxed. Aisha looked up, her face hardening as she recognized him. He saw the pain flicker in her eyes, quickly masked by a wall of cold indifference. The cubs, sensing the change in atmosphere, scurried behind her. Duma rose slowly to her feet, a low growl rumbling in her chest. He knelt, offering his hands in supplication. "Aisha," he choked out, his voice hoarse. I was wrong." He didn't try to explain, didn't try to justify his actions. He knew words were useless now. He simply poured out everything he had. Every jewel, every coin, every deed to land at her feet. "Use it," he pleaded. "Build a place where you will always be safe. A place where no one can ever hurt you again." He stayed only long enough to see the flicker of hope in Aisha's eyes, the slow softening of Duma's gaze. Then, he turned and walked away, leaving behind the woman he loved, the children he had abandoned, and the beginning of a sanctuary built on atonement. He knew he could never truly earn their forgiveness, but he hoped one day they might understand.